We're gonna take a look at adding and subtracting real numbers. So just mostly just understanding what kind of sign we get when we add two numbers together, like a negative and a positive, or that kind of scenario of what should the number be negative, should the number be positive, how do we determine that? One key aspect of adding and subtracting real numbers is understanding the numbers on a number line. If I'm at -3 and I add on 4, what's happening if I add on 4? Which direction am I heading if I add on +4? So I'm down $3. I've lost $3, and now I've gained $4 back. I found $4, or I earned $4, whatever. But I was down $3, but now I got 4. Which direction am I going? I'm gaining $4, so I'm going this way. So -2, -1, 0, 1. I'm now at +1 because I've went in the positive direction. I've earned $4, so now I'm up $1. If you want to think of it like that, I was down $3, and now I'm up $1 because I gained $4 back. Just understanding that relationship between if I'm in negative, and I'll do one more if I'm in negative, and then I go more negative or go more positive. So I'll do one more quickly here. So if I'm at like -2, and I lose $3 this time, so I've lost $2, and now I've lost $3 more. Which direction am I heading then? Well, if I lose money, I'm already down $2, and I've lost more dollars. I'm going this way, down 3 units. So really, I'm doing -2 plus a -3 because I'm losing more money. And just understanding that relationship between when I'm at negative and I'm adding on positive, what I'm really doing is 4 minus 3. And when I'm at -2 and I lose more, I'm really just adding the two negatives together to make it more negative because I'm going further in the negative direction. A lot of people struggle with that concept of being able to connect from, is this answer going to be negative or is it going to be positive? Which direction am I going? And you don't necessarily have to use a number line, but just the number line helps get a sense of like what happens when we are adding and subtracting numbers. So number one, -2 plus -3, if we have the same signs, meaning they're both negative or they're both positive, you just add. You just do 2 plus 3, which is 5. They're both negative, so it stays -5. If it's 2 plus 3, that's 5. They're both positive, so it stays 5. But here we have two negatives, so it stays negative, just like how I showed you. Just like I showed you when you have -2 and then you add on -3, you go more into the negatives. So number 2, -6 minus 4. I'm at -6 and I'm subtracting 4. I'm going further in the negative direction. So I'm doing -6 plus a -4. And there's a little rule here with that. So -6 minus 4. There's like a method, and the method is called keep flip change. So meaning I keep -6, I change subtraction to addition, and I change the 4 to a -4. So it becomes -6 plus a -4. That's great. I like that. But that does, some people do struggle with that because then they try to want to make everything change to the opposite. But if it's -6 minus 4, you could look at this as -6 plus a -4, just like how I showed you here with -2 minus 3. You're doing -2 plus a -3 because you're going further in the negative direction. So now we're in the scenario where we have same signs. Again, same signs. They're both negative, and I'm adding. So 6 plus 4 is 10. Both numbers negative, so -10. And then number 3, 4 minus a -2. If you want to do the keep flip change, you would say 4, flip subtraction to addition. It's also called leave change. But keep 4 because it might be confused with division of fractions. Keep flip change, like keep flip division and multiplication and so on, but not getting into that. But 4 plus +2. Keep flip change. So that becomes 6. Another way of knowing this, you don't really have to do the keep flip change. I always just like to explain it as if I'm at 4 minus a -2, if I'm doing 4 minus a -2, I am at 4 and I'm subtracting off a negative. I'm subtracting a negative. That's going to be taking the opposite of -2. So I'm adding on +2. 4 plus 2 is 6. And then number 4, 7 minus 2 is 5. Just a straight up 5. Like there's nothing else to really say. 7 minus 2 is 5. And if you wanted to think of like, okay, well, if I have 7 minus 2, that would be 7 plus a -2. When you have different signs like this, you just subtract the bigger number from the smaller, or you take the smaller number from the bigger number. So you do big minus a small number. So 7 minus 2 is 5. Keep the sign of the bigger number, which is positive, so it's 5. Let's apply that to number 5. Negative 3 minus a negative 10. So just like I talked about, negative 3 minus a negative. If you're subtracting a negative, you're really adding 10. Now we have different signs. So if you have different signs, you subtract. Different signs, you subtract. And it's an addition problem. So negative 3 plus 10, you want to do 10 minus 3, which is 7. The bigger number was positive, so it stays positive 7. Number 6, negative 9 plus 5. We have a negative and a positive. We have different signs. So subtract the two numbers and ignore the negative for a second and just think of the 9 as the bigger number. So I would do 9 minus 5, which is 4. What's the sign of the bigger number? The sign of the bigger number was negative because it was a negative 9. So the answer is negative 4. And if you don't like that, if you want to think of it as, well, if I'm on a number line and I'm at negative 9 and I gain $5, so I'm down $9, I gain $5, which direction am I heading? Am I going in more negatives or am I going back towards the positives? I'm going back towards the positives and I get all the way up to negative 4. So now I'm only down $4. I was down 9. I found $5 because I'm adding on 5, but now I'm only down 4. It's really up to you how you want to go about understanding this and being able to add and subtract positive and negative numbers, because it is a difficult concept at first. 12 plus negative 5, we have 12 different signs of positive and negative. So I just do 12 minus 5, which is 7. Bigger number was positive, so it's positive 7. Now in number 8, we have a couple operations going on. We have negative 14 minus 9 plus 12 minus a negative 5. So just go left to right. Just thinking of order of operations, just go left to right. Negative 14 minus 9 is going to be negative 14 plus negative 9, because that's key. Flip, change. Now they're both negative, so I'm going to do 14 plus 9, which is 23. So negative 23 plus 12 minus negative 5. Negative 23 plus 12. Those are different signs. Those are different signs. One's a negative and one's a positive. So when we do this, you want to do 23 minus 12, which is 11. Bigger number was negative, so it's negative 11 minus negative 5. And then we want to do the negative 11 minus negative 5. So that's going to be negative 11 plus 5. Minus a negative is adding 5. Now we have different signs again. We have a negative and a 5. So I'm going to do 11 minus 5, which is 6. Bigger number was negative, so negative 6. A lot happening there. Number 9, we have brackets. We have bracket negative 4 minus negative 9 plus bracket 5 minus 7. So in the bracket here, negative 4 minus a negative 9, that's going to be negative 4 minus a negative 9 is plus 9. So we're dealing with each bracket separately. Negative 4 plus 9, different signs. So you subtract. 9 minus 4 is 5. Bigger number was positive, so it stays positive. That's just going to be a straightforward 9 minus 4. Plus 5 minus 7. So 5 plus a negative 7. Or if you're at 5 and you go down 7, you're going to be at negative 2. 7 minus 5 is 2. Bigger number was negative, so negative 2. 5 plus negative 2 is positive 3, because it's 5 minus 2, which is positive 3. So that one is going to come out to be positive 3. Number 10, we have an exponent, and then we have brackets with parentheses inside. So a lot going on here. So let's go ahead and evaluate this. 2 to the third is going to be 2 times 2 times 2, which is 8. The exponent of 3 tells us how many times to multiply that 2 together. Minus bracket negative 4 minus 2. So negative 4 minus 2 is negative 4 plus a negative 2, which is negative 6. Because it's 2 plus 4, which is 6. They're both negative, so it stays negative. So we're going to have negative 6 minus 1. And since I did the parentheses of negative 4 minus 2, I don't necessarily need the parentheses there anymore. It's just going to get us negative 6. But we do need the bracket, just to be careful here. So I'm going to have 8 minus, and then in the bracket, negative 6 minus 1 This is going to become negative 6 plus a negative 1. If you're at negative 6 and you're subtracting 1, you're going further in the negative. So negative 6 plus a negative 1. 6 plus 1 is 7. They're both negative, so it stays negative. And look at this, 8 minus a negative 7. So since you have 8 minus a negative 7, that's going to become 8 plus 7. Minus a negative is adding. 8 plus 7 is 15. So those examples were just adding and subtracting real numbers, which are just integers here in this case. Want to look at inverses, opposites or additive inverses. So in number 11, so this is what I was referring to, like this concept, 8 minus a negative 11. 8 minus a negative 11, I'm sorry, why am I saying 11? 8 minus a negative 7 is subtracting a negative. What that's called is the inverse, where if I have the opposite, I'm sorry, not the inverse, the opposite, negative and a negative 8, negative and a negative 8 is become a positive 8, because we want to take the opposite. This negative sign is representing the opposite. So it's saying take the opposite of negative 8. What's the opposite of negative 8? That's positive 8. Because if I'm at negative 8, here's 0. What's the opposite of that? It's positive 8. And you can think of it another way. Negative 1 times negative 8 is another way of thinking about it. If that's a negative 1 and that's a negative 8, negative 1 times negative 8 is a positive 8. There's a lot of different ways to kind of conceptualize that idea of the opposite of a value. Number 12, take the opposite. Negative sign is representing the opposite. Take the opposite of negative 3/4. So if it's negative 3/4, it's going to become positive 3/4 because we're taking the opposite of negative 3/4. We're in 13. We've got to be careful here because we want to take the opposite of the absolute value of negative 4. So going back to absolute value discussions. Absolute value is the distance from 0. So if I want the absolute value of negative 4, that is 4 units. But now I want to take the opposite of that. I want to take the opposite of the absolute value of negative 4. The absolute value of negative 4 was 4. Taking the opposite would give us negative 4. And I know you might be thinking, like, I thought the absolute value is always positive. That's not necessarily true, where the absolute value of 0 is 0, and the absolute value of negative 4 is positive 4, and the absolute value of positive 4 is 4. So yeah, the absolute value is not going to be negative, but the answer could be negative because we want the opposite of that. So we want to take the opposite of negative 4, I'm sorry, the opposite of the absolute value of negative 4, which absolute value of negative 4 is positive, so it's going to become negative. I think some of my examples might have dropped out. So these are opposites, but the additive inverses, some of my examples here must have just not transferred over. That's okay. Let's just look at evaluating expressions, and then we'll take a look at some applications with this. So evaluating expressions, we want to find the value of each expression when x equals 3, y is equal to negative 4. So number 14, y minus x. So I'm going to evaluate when y is equal to negative 4. So I'm going to replace y with negative 4 minus the x value of 3 over 6 minus the x value of 3 plus the y value of negative 4. So I'm replacing the x and y with the value that it's equal to. So y minus x, so negative 4 minus 3. So on top, I have negative 4 minus 3. That's going to be negative 4 plus a negative 3, because I'm at negative 4 and I'm subtracting off. So I'm adding those two numbers together. 4 plus 3 is 7. They're both negative, so it stays negative 7. On the bottom, 6 minus 3 is 3 plus a negative 4. So that's going to be different signs. 4 minus 3 is 1. Bigger number was negative 4. So that's negative 1. Now here, we end up with a negative over a negative. Negative divided by a negative makes that positive. So positive 7 for that one. $15, good evaluation here. What do we have? We have 2 times the x value being raised to the third minus 2 times the y value being raised to the second. So 2 times the x value of 3 being raised to the third minus 2 times the y value of negative 4 being raised to the second. So we're going to have 2 times 3 to the third is 3 times 3 times 3. So 3 to the third is 27. So we get 27. minus 2, negative 4 squared is negative 4 times negative 4. Negative times a negative is a positive. 4 times 4 is 16. So we end up with minus 2 times 16. Be careful there. That's a tough little section there. Negative 4 squared is negative 4 times negative 4, which is positive 16. Okay. Now we just have to multiply some values together. 2 times 27, 2 times 16, just using order of operations, and then we will have our answer. So 2 times 27 is going to be 54. So we get 54 minus 2 times 16 is 32. So 54 minus 32 now. We're just doing a straightforward 54 minus 32 is 22. And there is our answer. Evaluating expressions there. Just making sure you're doing the correct order, using order of operations, and then the subtraction part. A couple applications with subtracting real numbers, adding and subtracting real numbers. This first application says, a record low in Chicago for the month of January is negative 21 degrees. A record high in Chicago for the month of January is 65 degrees. How much warmer is the record high than the record low? So record low in the month of January is negative 21 degrees. So if I'm like looking at a thermometer here, here's 0, I'm at negative 21. The record high is 65. So what we want to know is we want to know how much higher is the record high than the record low. So what is this distance? So if I put 65 on the same thermometer here, what is this distance from here to here? From 65 all the way through negative 21. So what we're doing is we're doing 65 minus negative 21, not 65 minus 21, because we have to go from 65 to 0. We have to know how many units that is, plus from 0 to 21, because we're going through from here all the way down to 21. So 65 to 0 is 65 units, plus 0 to 21, because we're going in the negatives. So really, you have to do it as 65 minus a negative 21, which becomes 65 plus 21. So that's going to be 6 plus 2 is 8, 5 plus 1 is 6, so 86. So there is an 86 degree difference between 65 degrees and negative 21 degrees. Last set of applications here, complementary and supplementary angles. Complementary means that the angles equal 90 degrees. It's a right angle. So a right angle is 90 degrees. That box indicates a right angle. This is 90 degrees. Supplementary angles are 180 degrees. So the angles equal 180 degrees. So a good visual of that is what's called straight angle. So if this is like x and this is y, x plus y adds up to 180. Same thing over here. If you kind of just draw an angle in here, this is x and y. X plus y is equal to 90. So find the missing angle. On number 17, what kind of relationship do we have? We have supplementary angles because it's making up this straight angle relationship. It's just a straight line with an angle coming out of it where one angle is y, the other angle is 54. So we're just trying to figure out, well, what is the missing angle? How big is this missing angle? Well, what we're trying to do is understand, well, 54 plus what is going to get us 180? Another way of thinking of that is, what is 180 minus 54? Just a much cleaner way of understanding that rather than 54 plus something. I'm trying to guess. Just do 180 minus 54, and that gives us an answer of 126. So the missing angle here is going to be 126 degrees. And then number 18, what's the missing angle there? Well, the relationship here is this is a right angle. Because we have two angles meeting at a corner. They're perpendicular to one another, creating a right angle. So we know that these two angles, x plus 48, is going to equal 90 degrees, just like over here. Y plus 54 is going to equal 180 degrees. Same thing. How do we figure that out? What plus 48 equals 90, or just doing 90 minus 48, which is 42. So we get the missing angle of 42 degrees. Good applications there for adding and subtracting real numbers.